As a reward for my class's good grade progress and fundraising efforts, my classmates and I were able to travel to Germany at the end of the year for a student exchange program with partner schools. One of our partner schools was not far from Cologne. I spent a few days settling in and getting to know my host family, and we got along quite well. At lunchtime on a school day, my host and I took the train into the city center of Cologne to see a more urban side of the area and meet up with some of the kids. The exchange student pairs had the afternoon off to get acquainted and meet up with each other. We agreed to meet outside the Kölner Dom, an iconic Gothic cathedral, to eat. Now, people who have lived there might have a different perspective, but to those of us who were young, naive tourists who were just excited to be there, Cologne in the middle of the day felt safe. It was bustling with people from every corner of the world. The sky was clear and bright, and there were musicians outside of the cathedral playing all sorts of music styles for the visitors. To give some perspective, I'm a guy, but I was regularly mistaken for a girl throughout my teenage years. I had a baby face, wore pretty androgynous clothing, and my hair was long. I was also socially awkward and reserved as a teen, and tried to be polite to everyone. I ate lunch with the kids from my school. About 15 other students from my school were also part of the exchange program, and many of them I knew well. Some of the girls had bought a lot of chocolate bars from one of the tourist shops and offered them to the rest of the group. They were sitting on the edge of a fountain, and I took one of the chocolate bars and sat down with them. I stayed out of their conversation, not interested in what they were talking about, but absolutely interested in their stash of German chocolate. So I didn't go back over to where I had been eating my actual lunch with a group of my friends a few feet away. I was zoning out of an expensive-looking shop, one of those with almost nothing on display in the windows and a guard, when this much older guy comes up to me and motions to the half-eaten bar of chocolate in my hands. His face looked like it had too much skin for the fat under it. It was all hanging off his cheekbones, like a shirt that was 3 sizes too large. He only had a few teeth, was wearing way too many clothes for the heat of the day, and was so filthy that I couldn't discern any color in his skin or clothes. It all just looked grey from the grime. I thought he might be homeless. Since the dude had approached me just asking for food, I thought I would be doing something kind by sharing. I broke off a piece of the chocolate bar, and he got this big grin on his face when I held it out. He took the chocolate, and instead of leaving like I thought he would, he leaned in and started furiously kissing my cheeks, alternating between left and right. I froze. I'm familiar with the custom of kissing someone's cheeks as a way of saying hello or goodbye, but it's very unusual in my country, and this didn't feel anything like that. Instead of the typical air kiss or quick peck, this guy was kissing me hard, fast, and so sloppy that I could feel his saliva on my face. My train of thought stopped completely, and I was panicking. I was disgusted by how physical this man, who was at least twice my age, was being, and freaked out. I wanted him far away from me, but I had no idea what to do. In the haze of my panic, I heard my close friend Tyler shout, "Hey!" loudly. People were often intimidated by Tyler, as they wore clothes with a lot of metal and pins, had a mohawk, and many facial piercings. and was outwardly an aggressive person, despite being warm-hearted and friendly once you got to know them. Picture the stereotype of a fanatic punk rocker. That was Tyler. Tyler grabbed the guy, who was almost on top of me, by the shoulders and shoved him to the ground, shouting at the man, "Get away from him." I got the impression that the man couldn't understand English, but Tyler had startled him enough that he scrambled to his feet and ran off. Dazed and feeling a bit dumb for not doing it myself, I mumbled a thanks to Tyler. Tyler then explained that the guy had done the same thing to a couple of the girls. Somehow I hadn't noticed. We stayed by the fountain for another hour or two, and I hung by Tyler. I was embarrassed about freezing up like I had, but I was still grateful and somewhat on edge. Tyler and some of their friends decided to visit the museum that was beside the cathedral. I chose not to go with, and told them I was going to take a look around the bookstore next door. The creepy dude had slipped my mind by this point, and I figured he was long gone. How wrong I was. The moment I left the bookstore, this guy appeared in front of me out of nowhere. I'm not sure what made me realize it, but my stomach sank as it hit me that he had waited for me to be away from Tyler and the other students. He had waited for me to leave the bookstore. I had no proof of this, but my gut was sure, and I was inclined to believe it. Most of the visitors to the area had left by this point, and I was alone, and not a big guy compared to him. He said something in a language I didn't recognize, and handed me a flower. I have no idea why I took it, but when I did, he kissed my cheek again. No longer stunned, I had had enough of him, and wasn't about to put up with his behavior again. I ducked away from the kiss, and shoved him roughly in the chest with both hands, forcing him away from me. Mustering the dirtiest look I could, I told him, not so nicely, to scram, and pushed my way past him without wasting another second. Thankfully, I didn't see him again. What a creep. 2. This happened about a year ago when I was 26. I am a female and tend to be friendly to most people. I'm not a tiny woman, 5'7" and heavier, but I still get quite a lot of attention. For some fucking reason. This particular day, I was headed home from work. I worked in a warehouse at the time, and was wearing old yoga pants and an old bleach-stained shirt. No makeup, hair up. It is summer in South Carolina, and it's hot. I basically look as unattractive as I possibly could. I just moved into a new apartment. I was going to build myself some shelves out of wood and cinder blocks. I decided to swing by Lowe's after work to get the materials I need. I grab one of those large pallet carts and start collecting the things I need. I am strong and pride myself on being able to build things and lift things and generally just being able to do shit on my own. As I'm putting the cinder blocks on my cart, this Lowe's employee walks up to me. I smile politely at him. He's maybe 5'11", wireframe glasses, sparse stash, yellowing teeth, balding, but fit. Maybe in his 40s, although I'm a bad judge of age. He offers to help. No thanks, I've got this. Him. Oh no, it's okay. This is what I'm paid to do. Huge, toothy grin. He literally takes the cart from me and starts pushing it and starts asking me all these questions which seem pretty standard at first. What are you building? What do you need? Things like that. I answer but keep them short. I'm definitely getting the vibe that he's trying to pick me up. He then starts telling me about how he is an ex-Marine and his time in the service and how he stays fit and in shape and how strong he is. And then, I kid you not, he flexes for me. Like, who are you, Johnny Bravo? At this point, I'm getting annoyed, but not creeped out. Let me get my stuff to the checkout, man. We get to the lumber section, and I start to grab this board. Him, no, I can grab that. Me, nah, it's fine. I can do this on my own. Him, another toothy grin. Nuh-uh, in a sing-songy voice. Okay, whatever, maybe he needs to feel useful or something. I let him grab it. He walks behind me to get it, and as he does, I hear in my ear, like someone looking at something tasty. Immediately I'm like, oh fuck, it's going to be one of these situations where I have to awkwardly decline some advances. I ignore it. I have to get a couple more things, but he insists on getting them for me. Every time he walks behind me, he makes those yum, sounds right in my ear. Fuck the rest of the stuff, I want to get out of here. I tell him I'm going to the checkout, and he reminds me of the other stuff I mentioned, and that he can help me with it. No, I need to be going home. I am definitely not friendly and not smiling anymore. I go to push the cart again. In a creepy sing-songy voice, he insists on doing it for me. We get to the checkout, and at this point, I've texted my best friend and told her about him, and his name, can't remember it now, and that if anything happened to me, that he was the one who did it. I'm only half joking. He's really creeping me out at this point. I'm at the register and one of the boards doesn't have a tag on it. Mr. Creep says he will go and grab another. He walks behind me again and whispers, "Delicious," in my ear. I get chills. He comes back with the board and walks behind me again and manages to brush against my hip, even though he has plenty of room. As he does, he whispers, "Eat you up." I finally get checked out, and this creep is still hanging around. He offers to help me out to my car. I say no, firmly. Well, I need to come take the car back when you're done. It'll be easier, or something to that effect. No, I am not letting him follow me to my car in this huge parking lot. He insists he has to bring the cart with him. So I say I'll just bring my car to the front and load it up. He finally relents and walks back inside. Thank God. I get my car and pull to the front. He comes out. Let me load that for you. Me, no. I have the board in my arms and he grabs it from me with this terrible smile and says in the creepiest way possible, like a seductive whisper, "Oh no, I got this. I can get it in there like swimwear." Massive wink. How the fuck does he know my name? My name is very unusual, and no one can guess it. My mom literally made up my name. I'm so skeezed out at this point, and I'm feeling really unsafe, even though we're at the front of the store and there are people about. He looks at me like I'm prey. He finishes loading my car, and I don't even acknowledge or thank him. He scoots around and opens my car door for me. Toothy grin. I completely ignore him, but have to be next to him to get in my car. Right in my car, I hear him whisper, "Delicious." I give him the most disgusted look I can muster. This doesn't deter him. He licks his lips and winks again. I get in my car and lock the doors. As I put my car in drive, he taps on my window and waves. And I look at him. I hear him say, "Safe drive back to," my apartment complex name. "It was nice getting to know you." My name. I piece the fuck out. I have never before seen that man in my life, and have no idea how he knows my name or where I live. I have never gone back to that Lowe's. Every time I think about that incident, I kick myself for not reporting him. 3. This happened a couple of years ago, during the first semester of my sophomore year in college. Being a female in college trains you to become sensitive to potentially sticky situations, especially when you're a frequent partier. I was 19 at the time, and had already had my fair share of creepy experiences with men, although most of the time they were, at most, very uncomfortable situations at parties or bars. I had never had an encounter that made me genuinely fear for my life, and I always felt like I could get away safely without having to deal with any further contact with the individual. I consider myself a woman with good gut instinct. Another important thing to mention before getting into my story is that at the time I was a bit, eccentric. To shorten a very long story, I was still in active addiction and almost completely off my rocker during this time, which reflected in my appearance. I had a lavender-colored hair, several facial piercings, and would dress like a walking acid trip. I also used a hula hoop all the time for fun. I still do on occasion, but not very often, and had a few friends who did as well. When the weather was nice, we would meet up at night on the weekends and practice together, amongst other things. I would often be treated negatively because of my appearance. A handful of times, psychiatrists accused me of drug seeking during my diagnostic appointments, all trying to get treatment for anxiety and depression. And if it was late at night, it wasn't uncommon for me to be stopped by police and questioned about my activities. At this point, it didn't surprise me anymore when something like that would happen, and I had developed a piss-poor attitude against cops. The university I attend is huge. We have about 60,000 students and 4 campuses, which are decently spread out from one another. The campuses are integrated into the city that it's located in. Generally speaking, the city is an absolute shithole, but the areas closest to campus, although not that much nicer in appearance, are generally a lot safer. A good amount of students live in this off-campus housing area. We have a very extensive bus system, so that, in theory, students can easily travel between campuses in order to get around. But the buses do not travel into off-campus territory, so if you want to get somewhere around there, you have to walk to your destination from the bus stop. That night, I decided to meet up with one of my friends to hook. We both had class until late that night, so we agreed to meet at around 9 p.m. at her place. She lived in a house off campus, a mile away from the closest bus stop. The road was shaped like an L. The bus stop was at the very top of the L. The walk to the corner was about 3/4 of a mile, followed by a right turn and another 1/4 mile walk to the end of the street. The first part of the walk wasn't notorious for being bad, but her street could get a little sketchy at times. It's also worth mentioning that about a block away from the bus stop en route to her house is a pretty large hospital. So I took the bus as far as I could, and once I reached the closest stop, I began walking to her place. I put my headphones in and, with hula hoop in hand, began my trek. I thought nothing special of the walk. I went the entire time daydreaming and jamming out to my music. The street was well lit, and there was nobody else about. So that, combined with the familiarity of the route, made me feel indifferent. Everything was absolutely normal. But then, about halfway down the first portion of my walk, I noticed a police car drive by me. It was one of those undercover cars. That's as opposed to a clearly marked vehicle. But it was still obviously a police car. As with a lot of people, my senses heighten when there are police present. I didn't freak out or anything, but it was noted. I continued along with my walk, and about a block later, I noticed the same police car pass by me again, this time coming from the opposite direction and moving a bit closer. This made me very irritated. I was tired of being harassed by police officers, but this particular night I also had something in my bag which could have potentially gotten me in trouble with the law, so anxiety began to set in atop of my irritation. I really did not want to deal with something like this. The officer didn't stop me, and eventually passed by me and turned onto the next street. So I decided that picking up the pace, but not at a suspicious rate, would probably be for the best. I made it down to my friend's street and turned onto it. I was thankful that the longest part of the walk was over, and that I only had about 5 more minutes of being on high alert until I was home free. I got maybe about a block and a half down when I saw the cop car for the 3rd time coming my way, passing by me even slower than the last time. At this point, I was starting to feel extremely anxious, praying to a god that I didn't believe in to please get this officer away from me. I was almost in tears, scenarios featuring the worst possible outcome of this situation, involving arrest, getting kicked out of school, and my parents dubbing me the family embarrassment and disowning me were playing in my head. I was on the verge of an anxiety attack. At this point, I could see my friend's house and picked up the pace just a little bit more. After what felt like an eternity, I finally made it to her house. She always used the side entrance, which was located about at the end of her driveway, about 30 feet long. It was actually more like a small parking lot, since the property was a very large house split into several apartments. Just as I began walking up her driveway, the cop car came speeding down the street and pulled into the driveway after me. This is it, I thought to myself. I was prepared for the worst to happen, but knew that if I played it cool, it would most likely be okay. The cop didn't get out of his car, but rolled his window down instead. I took my headphones out and turned my attention to him. "Good evening, ma'am," he said in a kind of concerned voice. "I just wanted to know, are you okay right now?" Huh? What a weird question. Definitely not what I was expecting. "Yeah, I'm totally fine," I replied. Just planning on hanging out with a friend tonight. I'm coming from name of other campus, and this is her house. Why do you ask?" He looked at me with a look of concern in his eyes. "We got a call from someone who was sitting outside of the emergency room at the hospital. They phoned in to inform that someone was following you down Arlington Street, the longer stretch of the journey, since from at least the time you were in front of the hospital. This confused me, for not once had there been any sort of indication that I was being followed. No sir, I'm fine. I didn't notice anything suspicious, and nobody has approached me." Immediately after I said this, a man jumped out of a large bush on the side of my friend's house, about 7 feet away from where I was standing. He looked about 40 to 50 years old, tall, lanky, and was dressed in dirty old clothing. He was looking right at me with a seriously sinister look in his eyes, smiling ear to ear. In his hand was a large hunting knife. He turned to me and started to cackle while stretching out both his arms, fully exposed with his knife. "Come on, baby. Why'd you have to call your boyfriend on me like this? All I wanted was to ask you for a cigarette." Then, right in front of the police officer, he quickly began to approach me. I didn't pay attention to what the cop did to handle the situation, because I immediately sprinted down the driveway to my friend's door and began to pound as loudly as I could. She must have been in the living room, because she answered the door fairly quickly. I bolted inside, hyperventilating and shaking. She looked outside, and there were now 4 cop cars in the driveway. Naturally, she was extremely concerned and confused, and asked me what the hell had just happened. I explained to her the situation, and she was horrified. After the police handled it, they knocked on the door to make sure I was unharmed. They didn't know who he was because he had no ID on him, but it was very likely, based on how he looked and where he was psychologically, that he was one of the many homeless men around here. We have a huge homeless population here. They took him away, and I never heard anything about it again. This man must have been extremely sick, as he had the audacity to approach me with a knife directly in front of a police officer. I shudder to think what would have happened to me if a good Samaritan hadn't listened to their gut and called for help. The first thing I did when I got home that night was order pepper spray off of Amazon with 2-day shipping. I never walk around when it's dark with my headphones in anymore. And I always consciously note things that seem off about my surroundings as I walk. Even if you think you have an intuitive gut, never grow complacent, and always stay on the lookout. I am infinitely grateful for that officer, and have since had a serious change of heart regarding my prejudice against the police. Also, this was extremely stupid of me to do in the first place, as I obviously learned my lesson. But I reiterate, never walk around when it's dark with both headphones in. This situation may have been prevented if I didn't do this.